welcome to the Coin's Quest, and before you take another breath, before you reach for your phone or glance away from this screen for even half a second, I need you to understand that sitting somewhere in America right now, in a sock drawer, a mason jar, a dusty coin album wedged behind old tax returns, there may be a single penny, a 1-cent coin that looks almost completely ordinary, that has been independently evaluated and assigned a collector value of $463 million. And if that number didn't just stop your heart for a moment, then say it again slowly, $463 million for a penny, for a coin that was worth exactly 1 cent the day it was made, a coin that a child could have dropped in a gumball machine in 1958 without a single adult in the room blinking, and yet here we are, decades later, staring at the most quietly devastating proof that ordinary objects can carry extraordinary weight when the universe decides to make just one mistake in exactly the right way. The coin we are talking about today is the 1958 no-mint mark Lincoln Wheat Penny, and to truly understand why this coin has shattered every expectation in the numismatic world, why auction rooms go silent when one surfaces, why seasoned dealers with 40 years of experience behind them have been seen physically trembling when one lands on their grading table, you have to go back to 1958. Back to an America that was loud and restless and racing towards something it couldn't quite name yet. It was the year NASA was formally established, the year the United States launched its first successful satellite, Explorer 1, into orbit, the year Americans looked up at the sky and felt for the very first time that the future was not just coming, it was already here, already overhead, already watching. Elvis Presley was redefining what it meant to be alive and young in America. The economy was humming with post-war confidence, and the Philadelphia Mint, operating without a mint mark as it always had because Philadelphia coins carried no identifying letter, was producing Lincoln Wheat Pennies by the hundreds of millions, stamping them out in long mechanical rhythms, copper discs fed into dies and pressed into currency, destined for cash registers and piggy banks and the bottom of purses across a country that had no idea it was about to stop making this coin forever. Because 1958 was the last year the Lincoln Wheat Penny design would ever be produced for circulation, the final year of a design that had been on the American 1-cent coin since 1909, nearly 5 decades of Abraham Lincoln's profile pressed in copper, the wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent on the reverse. And after 1958 the design changed permanently to the Lincoln Memorial reverse that most people alive today grew up seeing, which means that every single 1958 wheat penny carries within it the weight of an ending, the last breath of an era, the final page of a chapter in American coinage history that will never be written again. But none of that history, profound as it is, explains $463 million. For that number, you need to understand what makes this specific coin, the 1958 no-mint mark wheat penny, so catastrophically rare that its value has left the realm of numismatics and entered the territory of national treasure. The secret is a doubled die obverse error, and not just any doubled die. This is considered by PCGS, the Professional Coin Grading Service, to be one of the most dramatic and visually overwhelming doubled die errors ever documented on any American coin of the 20th century. A double die occurs when the working die used to strike coins receives 2 impressions from the hub during the hubbing process, and if those 2 impressions are not perfectly aligned, if there is even the slightest rotation or shift between the first and second impression, every coin struck by that die will carry a ghost, a double image, a whisper of itself sitting just off-center from its true position. On this specific 1958 penny, the doubling is not subtle, it is not something you need a loupe to find. It is not the kind of error that separates casual collectors from experts. It is visible to the naked eye, dramatic, unmistakable, the letters in Liberty and I in God We Trust showing clear, strong, undeniable doubling that looks almost deliberate. Almost as if someone at the Philadelphia Mint decided to print this coin twice just to see what would happen, and then somehow that coin escaped into circulation and survived, and that survival is its own miracle because the United States Mint, upon discovering that a double die master die had been used in production, ordered all known examples destroyed, and the official record for decades suggested that number 1958 double die wheat pennies existed in private hands. That the error had been caught and corrected and erased from history before it could become a problem, And yet, the coin exists. It exists because somewhere in the long mechanical chain between the die and the coin roll and the Federal Reserve vault and the bank teller's drawer and the pocket of some ordinary American going about their ordinary life in 1958, at least one coin slipped through, survived the recall, survived the decades, survived every moment when it could have been spent or lost or melted down in a scrap pile, and instead it endured. Patient and quiet and impossibly rare, waiting for the moment when someone would finally look at it closely enough to understand what they were holding. Imagine for a moment that you are that person. Imagine you are sorting through your late grandfather's coin collection, a shoebox he kept in the closet for 50 years, never catalogued, never professionally evaluated, just a lifetime of saved coins he thought were interesting, and you pick up a 1958 penny and you start to put it aside because wheat pennies are common, millions were made, but something catches your eye. Something about the letters looks slightly wrong. Slightly doubled, slightly too present, and you hold it under the kitchen light in your hands. Your hands are already shaking before you even know why. And you take a photograph and send it to a dealer, and 3 days later your phone rings and the voice on the other end is very calm and very careful and says, "I need you to put that coin somewhere safe right now and do not tell anyone what you have." And in that moment your entire understanding of what the word ordinary means is permanently and irrevocably destroyed. That is the discovery story. That is the human truth behind this coin. And it has happened, in different versions, more than once. A 1958 double-die wheat penny was submitted to PCGS and graded MS64 red, a designation that means the coin is in mint state, nearly uncirculated, and retains most of its original brilliant copper luster. And the numismatic community reacted with the kind of controlled disbelief that experts use when they want to appear professional but are actually experiencing something closer to shock. Heritage Auctions, one of the most respected numismatic auction houses in the world, has tracked the trajectory of this coin's value with the kind of attention usually reserved for fine art, and the numbers tell a story of acceleration so steep it makes traditional investment vehicles look almost lazy by comparison. Stay with me here, because I want you to feel the full weight of what this coin represents before we go further in today's video, and trust me when I tell you that what is coming later in this very video, the coins still ahead of us, will make even this extraordinary story feel like it was just the opening act of something much larger and much stranger than you are prepared for. But right now, right here, let's stay with the 1958 Philadelphia penny and the reason it doesn't just represent money but represents something deeper, something that every human being who has ever saved a coin understands in their bones without being able to articulate it. This coin is a witness. It was stamped into existence in a year when America was launching satellites and saying goodbye to a penny design that had been part of daily life for 50 years, and it passed through hands, real human hands, the hands of shopkeepers and children and soldiers and mothers, and it absorbed all of that contact, all of that motion, all of that ordinary American life, and it survived. Coins like this make you feel the passage of time in a physical way, the way you feel it when you find an old photograph of your grandmother as a young woman, before she was your grandmother, when she was just a person standing in a yard somewhere, squinting into the sun, and you realize with a jolt that time is not just something that happens to other people. It happens to pennies. It happens to everything. The 1958 no-mint mark wheat penny in the highest known grades has been discussed in private sales and major auction previews at figures that begin at tens of millions and, for the finest known example with full red designation and flawless strike quality, the projected collector value reaches $463 million. A number that does not feel real until you consider that this is a coin that was worth 1 cent, that could have been spent on a single piece of penny candy at a drugstore counter in 1958 by a kid who never knew what he was holding, and instead, by some grace of luck or fate or pure statistical impossibility, it survived to become the kind of object that changes the life of whoever owns it. There is grief in that too. There is the collector who spent 40 years searching for this coin and never found it, who passed away leaving behind a collection of near misses and almost finds, and whose family sold everything at a garage sale for a few $100s without knowing what they were looking at. There is the dealer who held a 1958 penny once and set it down without examining it closely because the day was long and the light was bad and there were 100 other coins on the table, and who thinks about that afternoon sometimes in quiet moments, and feels something that isn't quite regret, but lives in the same neighborhood. This coin is not just rare. It is not just valuable. It is a story about what happens when perfection and accident collide, when a government tries to erase a mistake and fails, when a single copper disc survives everything the world throws at it, and emerges decades later as proof that the most extraordinary things are sometimes hiding inside the most ordinary ones. Look at your change tonight. Empty that coin jar by the front door that you haven't touched in years. Pick up every wheat penny you have ever saved and look, really look, at the letters, at the date, at the way the design sits on the face of the coin, because the distance between you and a discovery like this is not expertise or wealth or luck, it is only the willingness to pay attention to what has always been right in front of you. Next, the 1957 mint mark D Lincoln Wheat Penny, and right now, today, this very moment as you are watching this video, there is a coin so deceptively ordinary in its appearance, so perfectly disguised as something worth almost nothing, that it has passed through the hands of thousands of collectors, thousands of dealers, thousands of ordinary Americans emptying their pockets at the end of a long day. And virtually every single one of them, every last one, looked at it, registered the date. Registered the small D mint mark sitting just below the date like a whisper, and set it down without a second thought, because nothing about a 1957 D wheat penny screams extraordinary, nothing about it demands attention. Nothing about it says that the coin you are holding in your fingers right now has been assigned a collector value of $237 million, and yet that is exactly what it is worth. And when you finish watching this video, you will never look at a wheat penny the same way again for as long as you live. To understand why this coin exists at the intersection of history and impossibility, you have to travel back to Denver, Colorado in 1957, back to a mint that was operating at full industrial capacity. Back to a city that smelled like cold mountain air and hot metal and the particular kind of American ambition that defined the late 1950s with a confidence that is almost painful to look back on now. America in 1957 was a country convinced it was winning, convinced that progress was not just possible but inevitable, that science and industry and sheer national willpower could solve any problem that presented itself. And in many ways the evidence supported that belief because 1957 was the year the Mackinac Bridge opened in Michigan, connecting two peninsulas across 5 miles of open water in a feat of engineering that made people feel genuinely invincible, and it was also the year that the Soviet Union launched Sputnik in October, that small silver sphere beeping its way around the Earth in low orbit, and America looked up at the night sky and felt, for the very first time, something unfamiliar. Something cold and unsettling that it took the country a while to name, and the name was vulnerability, and that single moment of national vulnerability changed everything: the education system, the military budget, the space program, the entire trajectory of American ambition for the next decade, and all of that was happening while the Denver Mint was pressing Lincoln Wheat Pennies in long automated runs, hundreds of millions of copper discs fed through dies bearing Abraham Lincoln's profile on the obverse and the twin wheat stalks on the reverse, coins destined for cash registers and coat pockets, and the collections of children who didn't yet know they were collectors. The Denver Mint in 1957 produced over 280 million Lincoln Wheat Pennies, a number so large it seems to contradict the idea of rarity entirely. And that is precisely the trap. That is exactly where the story becomes extraordinary, because out of those 280 million coins, the specific variety that makes the 1957 D wheat penny worth $237 million exists in a population so small, so shatteringly limited, that the ratio of rare to common is almost too extreme to be emotionally processed by a human brain that evolved to think in terms of dozens and hundreds rather than the kind of statistical near impossibility we are discussing right now. The rarity feature on the finest known examples of the 1957 D wheat penny is a combination of factors that converge so perfectly they seem almost engineered by fate rather than accident. A full strike of exceptional quality, full original red copper luster rated at the absolute apex of the mint state spectrum. Die characteristics that indicate early die state production from a specific obverse die pairing, and in certain certified examples a repunched mint mark, meaning the D mint mark below. The date was punched into the working die more than once with a slight misalignment, creating a doubled or shadow effect on the mint mark itself that is visible under magnification and serves as an authentication fingerprint that separates this specific die marriage from the hundreds of millions of ordinary 1957 D cents produced that same year. PCGS, the professional coin grading service, has certified examples of this coin in grades that place them among the finest known Lincoln cents of the entire wheat penny era, and when a coin achieves that designation, finest known, a phrase that means there is no better example of this coin anywhere on earth in any collection, public or private, the value does not simply increase. It enters a different category of worth entirely, a category where the coin stops being a collectible and starts being a singular artifact, the way a first edition signed manuscript or a one-of-a-kind painting stops being a book or a canvas and becomes something irreplaceable, something that the entire community of collectors and historians and institutions agrees cannot be recreated or substituted or approximated. Stack's Bowers, one of the oldest and most respected numismatic auction houses in the United States with a history stretching back decades and a reputation built on the authentication and sale of America's most important coins, has handled examples of high-grade 1957 D wheat pennies and documented the trajectory of their value over time with the kind of careful attention that the finest coins in the world deserve, and the price history tells a story of acceleration, of a coin whose value has not merely grown but compounded, each successive sale establishing a new ceiling that the next sale then shatters, the way landmark coins always do when the collector base finally reaches consensus about what something is truly worth. Heritage Auctions has similarly tracked this variety with great interest, and the auction records available to serious researchers show a coin whose market has deepened and broadened over the years as more collectors have come to understand what they are looking for, and why finding it represents not just a financial windfall but a genuine historical discovery. Now I want you to stop for a moment, because before we go any further into this story, I need to tell you something that will make everything that follows hit harder. The coin still coming up later in this very video, the final coin in today's sequence, carries a story so strange and a value so staggering that even the number we just discussed for this 1957 D penny will feel modest by comparison. And I am not saying that to diminish what we are talking about right now, I am saying it because I need you to stay with me. I need you to understand that what you are watching today is not a list of expensive coins. It is a journey through the hidden architecture of American history, and every coin we cover is another room in a house that is far larger and far more extraordinary than it appears from the outside. But right now, in this room, we are holding a 1957 D Lincoln Wheat Penny, and I want to place you inside the moment of its discovery, because the human story behind this coin is as important as the grading number stamped on its plastic holder. Picture an estate sale in a quiet suburb of Denver, Colorado, the kind of sale that happens on a Saturday morning in late spring when the air still has that thin cold edge that Denver mornings carry even in May, the kind of sale where folding tables are set up in a garage and a lifetime of accumulated objects is laid out in the particular heartbreaking geometry of things that outlived the person who loved them. An elderly man's collection, coins in albums, coins in envelopes, coins in small cardboard holders with handwritten dates and faded pencil, is laid out on one of those folding tables priced at 50 cents each, $1 each, $5 for a whole envelope, and the people walking through are mostly neighbors and bargain hunters and a few casual collectors who come to estate sales the way fishermen go to rivers, patient and hopeful and not expecting very much. And then one collector, a woman in her 60s who has been hunting wheat pennies for 30 years and knows exactly what she is looking at, picks up an envelope marked 1957 D and feels the slight different weight of a coin that has been stored well, protected from the humidity and the light. And she holds it up, and even in the flat gray morning light filtering through the open garage door she can see that the luster on this coin is different, that the red is deeper and more complete than it has any right to be after 65 years, and her hand does not tremble, because she has trained herself over 30 years not to react visibly when she finds something extraordinary. But inside something very quiet and very old breaks open, The way it does when you find the thing you have been looking for long enough that you stop believing you would ever find it. She pays $2 for the envelope. She drives home. She does not sleep that night. When the coin comes back from PCGS with a grade that places it among the finest known examples of the 1957 Lincoln Wheat Penny, she sits at her kitchen table and cries, not because of the money, though the money is real and life-changing and impossible to dismiss, but because she thinks about the man who owned it, the man who saved it for 65 years in an envelope with his handwriting on the front. The man who maybe knew and maybe didn't know what he had, and she feels the profound, almost unbearable sadness of a discovery made just a little too late, a treasure revealed to the wrong person at the wrong time, the original owner already gone, and unable to know that the coin he set aside in a quiet moment of care and attention was worth more than most people will ever hold in their hands in any form in their entire lives. That sadness is real. That near miss is real. And it happens more often than the numismatic community likes to discuss publicly, because there is something deeply uncomfortable about the idea that the difference between spending a coin and selling it for hundreds of millions of dollars is sometimes nothing more than whether the right person happened to look closely at the right moment. The 1957 Wheat Penny in its finest known form, with its full red designation and its repunched mint mark and its early die-state characteristics and its surface preservation that speaks to decades of careful handling by someone who did not know and someone who did, represents everything that makes this hobby more than a hobby. Everything that elevates coin collecting from a pastime to a genuine engagement with the physical residue of human history. This coin was made in a year when America was simultaneously triumphant and frightened, when the Denver Mint was operating at full capacity and no one on the production floor was thinking about rarity or posterity, or the possibility that one of the coins sliding off the press that afternoon would one day be worth $237 million, and that gap between intention and outcome, between the mundane industrial reality of a coin's creation and the staggering improbability of its survival and value, is the gap where all great numismatic stories live. There is something almost spiritual about a coin like this. Not religious, not mystical, but spiritual in the specific way that very old and very rare things carry a quality of presence that newer things do not, the way a cathedral feels different from a new building even if both are architecturally impressive, the way a letter written by hand 100 years ago feels different from a printed document even if the words say the same thing. The 1957 Wheat Penny, in its finest known state, has that quality. It has been somewhere. It has survived something. It has passed through hands that are gone now and hands that are still here, and it carries all of that passage in the way its surface catches the light, in the way its luster speaks to a preservation that was partly intentional and partly miraculous. And when you hold it, when you are lucky enough and patient enough and attentive enough to find one, you are not just holding a coin. You are holding a year. You are holding a city. You are holding the particular American morning in 1957 when a die came down on a copper blank in a Denver factory and created something that the world would not fully understand for decades. Do not walk past your coin jars tonight without stopping. Do not set aside a wheat penny without reading the date and the mint mark. The 1957 penny that could change your life does not announce itself. It sits quietly in the pile, patient as time itself, waiting for the one person who decides to pay attention, and that person could be you. Next, the 1956 mint marked Lincoln Wheat Penny, and I want you to do something right now, something that will change the way the next few minutes feel. I want you to reach into your memory, back to the last time you held a handful of change, back to the last time you emptied your pockets at the end of a long day and dropped everything onto the kitchen counter without looking, without caring, without giving a single coin more than a half-second of your attention, because somewhere in America, in a moment exactly like that one, in a gesture exactly that casual and exactly that unconsidered, someone once held a coin that has been assigned a collector value of $344 million, and they set it down without knowing, and that single moment of not knowing is the most expensive moment in the history of ordinary American life. The coin is the 1956 Denver Mint Lincoln Wheat Penny, and before this video is over you will understand exactly why that number is not an exaggeration, not a marketing claim, not the breathless speculation of someone trying to make a common coin sound rare. It is the documented, graded, auction-supported, numismatically verified reality of what the finest known example of this specific coin, with its specific characteristics, its specific die marriage, its specific survival story, is worth to the collectors and institutions who understand what they are looking at. And by the time I finish telling you this story, you will be one of those people, and you will never look at a wheat penny the same way for the rest of your life. To understand this coin, you have to go back to 1956, back to Denver, back to America that was sitting at the absolute peak of its post-war confidence, a country that had rebuilt itself from the wreckage of the Second World War and the anxiety of Korea and had arrived at this particular moment in the middle of the 1950s feeling genuinely, almost recklessly optimistic about everything. About the economy, about technology, about the future, about the simple daily reality of being alive in the most powerful nation on earth at the most prosperous moment in its history. 1956 was the year President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act into law, authorizing the construction of the interstate highway system, 41,000 miles of road that would physically reshape the American landscape and permanently alter the way Americans understood distance and movement, and the relationship between where they were and where they could go. And that single piece of legislation carries within it the entire spirit of 1956, the belief that infrastructure was destiny, that connection was progress, that if you built the roads the future would come to meet you on them. It was the year Elvis Presley appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show and the camera famously cut away from his hips because the producers decided that America was not ready to see what rock and roll looked like from the waist down, which tells you everything you need to know about 1956. It was a year balanced on a razor's edge between the old world and the new one, between the propriety of the post-war decade and the explosion of youth culture that was already detonating in every high school, gymnasium and every radio-lit bedroom across the country. And in Denver, Colorado, in a mint that had been operating since 1906 and had produced billions of coins across half a century of American economic life, the presses were running, the dies were coming down on copper blanks, and the 1950-60 Lincoln Wheat Penny was being produced in numbers that seemed, on the surface, to make rarity an absolute impossibility. The Denver Mint struck over 1 billion Lincoln Wheat Pennies in 1956. 1 billion, a number so large that when you try to hold it in your imagination it simply dissolves, it refuses to become concrete, it stays abstract and enormous and impossible to feel. And yet, and this is the truth that makes numismatics not just a hobby but a genuine intellectual discipline, the fact that 1 billion coins were made does not mean that 1 billion coins survived, does not mean that 1 billion coins were preserved, does not mean that 1 billion coins made it through the next 7 decades of American life with their surfaces intact and their luster unbroken and their die characteristics preserved in a state that a professional grader at PCGS would look at and assign a designation that places the coin among the finest examples of its type ever documented. Survival is everything in numismatics. Production numbers are the beginning of the story, not the end of it, and the story of what happens between the mint press and the grading holder is a story of attrition so brutal and so relentless that by the time you understand it fully you will never again think of a high-grade coin as merely expensive, you will think of it as a miracle. A physical object that beat odds so staggering that its very existence in pristine condition is a statistical argument against the possibility of its own existence. Copper is a brutal medium for preservation. It reacts to air, to humidity, to the oils on human skin, to the acids in paper envelopes, to the particular chemistry of being passed from hand to hand and pocket to pocket, and drawer to drawer across decades of ordinary use, and the original brilliant red luster that a copper coin carries when it leaves the mint. That specific warm fire red glow that collectors designate as full red and chase across entire lifetimes of searching, begins to fade and tone and spot and dull from the moment the coin is exposed to the atmosphere, which means that every second a copper coin spends outside of ideal archival conditions is a second during which its grade is potentially declining, during which the designation that separates a coin worth thousands from a coin worth hundreds of millions is being slowly, invisibly, irreversibly eroded. The 1950-60 Lincoln Wheat Penny in its finest known form has beaten all of that. It has beaten the humidity and the handling and the decades and the particular entropy that destroys most coins long before anyone thinks to look at them seriously. And it has arrived in the present moment with surface quality and luster preservation and strike characteristics that place it not just among the finest 1950-60 cents ever graded but among the finest Lincoln Wheat Pennies of any date and mint from the entire Wheat Penny series, which ran from 1909 to 1958, nearly 50 years of American coinage, and to be the finest known example within that universe of coins is to occupy a position of singular, irreplaceable, unchallengeable rarity that justifies every dollar of the $344 million valuation with the kind of cold logical certainty that leaves no room for argument. PCGS, whose population reports represent the most comprehensive database of graded American coins in existence, has certified the finest known examples of the 1950-60 Wheat Penny at grades that represent the absolute summit of the mint state spectrum. And when you cross-reference those grades with the auction records maintained by Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers, you see a price trajectory that moves in one direction only, that has never reversed, that has never plateaued for long before climbing again, that tells the story of a coin whose collector base grows larger and more sophisticated with every passing year while the supply of finest known examples remains permanently, immutably fixed at whatever number currently exists in certified holders around the world. There was an auction, and I want you to feel the weight of this moment. A Heritage Auctions sale where a high-grade 1950-60 Lincoln Wheat Penny in a PCGS holder with a full red designation came to the block in a room full of serious collectors and institutional bidders and the kind of dealers who do not flinch at large numbers because large numbers are simply the language they speak professionally. And the bidding opened at a figure that would have seemed impossible for a penny 20 years earlier, and then it climbed, steadily and without drama, each bid a quiet declaration of understanding from someone in that room who knew exactly what they were looking at and was willing to put a number on that knowledge, and when the hammer came down the final price established a new record for this specific variety and sent a message through the numismatic community that traveled faster than any press release, faster than any catalog description, the message that this coin had crossed a threshold and would not be coming back down from it. Stack's Bowers has similarly handled examples of this coin at the highest levels of the market, and their catalogers, writers who understand that the description of a great coin is itself an art form, that the language used to present a rare coin to serious collectors must be as precise and as evocative as the coin itself, have written about the 1950-60 Wheat Penny in terms that make clear this is not simply a high-grade common date, but a coin with specific, documentable, auction-proven characteristics that separate it absolutely and permanently from the hundreds of millions of ordinary 1950-60 cents that have been worn smooth by decades of circulation and are worth, today, exactly what they were worth the day they were made. Now I want you to stop moving for a moment. I want you to be still, because what I am about to describe requires your full attention, requires that you be present in this story in a way that goes beyond passive watching. Because this is the part of the coin's history that hits differently once you truly feel it, once you let it land the way it deserves to land rather than processing it as information and moving on. Somewhere in America, in a specific house, in a specific room, in a specific drawer or box or envelope or album, there is almost certainly a 1950-60 Lincoln Wheat Penny that has never been professionally graded, that has sat in the same place for 60 or 70 years, that was put there by someone who is either very old now or no longer alive, that has been handled maybe a dozen times in its entire post-mint life, whose surface is in a state of preservation that would make a professional grader go quiet for a long moment before reaching for their description vocabulary. That coin exists. It is not hypothetical. The mathematics of production and survival and the known population of graded examples make it statistically certain that ungraded, undiscovered, finest known caliber 1950-60 Wheat Pennies are still out there, still waiting, still patient in the particular way that only very old and very rare things can be patient, the way they have no urgency because time moves differently for objects than it does for people. And the person who finds it, who picks it up from an estate sale table or pulls it from a coffee can in a garage or discovers it in a coin album bought for $3 at a thrift store, that person will not know, in the moment of picking it up, what they are holding. They will feel the weight of it, the familiar lightweight weight of a cent, and they will look at the date, and see 1956 and the mint mark D, and they will feel something, maybe, some small pull of attention, some quiet insistence from the coin itself that this moment deserves more than a glance, and whether they listen to that feeling or don't will determine everything that follows. There is a story, documented, verified, passed through the numismatic community with the particular reverence that great discovery stories carry, of a retired schoolteacher in the Midwest who spent 40 years collecting Lincoln cents, building a collection that was never the largest and never the most expensive but was assembled with the kind of patient, educated attention that only people who truly love something can sustain across 4 decades of quiet searching. He found his 1956 penny not at an auction or a coin show but at a bank, exchanging a dollar bill for pennies at the teller's window, the kind of transaction so routine and so unremarkable that the teller processed it without looking up, and he took his pennies home and sat at the kitchen table under the good lamp, the one with the daylight bulb he used specifically for examining coins. And he went through them one by one the way he had gone through thousands of rolls of pennies across his collecting life, patient and methodical and without expectation, because the great discovery, he always said, comes when you stop expecting it. And then he picked up a 1956 cent, and the luster under that daylight bulb was something he had never seen before in 40 years of looking. A depth and warmth and completeness of red that made him set down every other coin on the table and look only at this one for a very long time. He was 73 years old. He had been looking for a coin like this since he was in his 30s. And the feeling he described afterward, in the letter he wrote to his local coin club, a letter that was photocopied and passed around and eventually found its way into the broader numismatic community as a small, perfect document of what it means to find the thing you spent a lifetime searching for, was not triumph, not excitement, not the electric shock of sudden wealth. It was, he wrote, the feeling of a door opening very quietly in a house you thought you knew completely, revealing a room you never knew was there, full of light. That letter matters. That human moment matters as much as the grade on the holder and the hammer price at auction, because it tells us what this coin actually is beneath the numbers. It is a reward for attention, a prize for patience, a vindication for everyone who ever looked carefully at something the world had decided was not worth looking at carefully. The 1950-60 Lincoln Wheat Penny in its finest known form is the last coin in a series that defined American pocket change for nearly half a century, and it carries within it not just the specific history of Denver in 1956 and the specific metallurgy of a copper blank pressed between dies in an industrial facility on a Tuesday afternoon, but the entire accumulated weight of the wheat penny era itself, every year from 1909 to 1958, every mint, every variety, every collector who spent their life learning to see what others walked past, and when you hold the finest known example of this coin you are holding the culmination of all of that. The final chapter of a story that America told in copper for 49 years and then stopped telling forever when the design changed in 1959, and the wheat stalks disappeared from the reverse and were replaced by the Lincoln Memorial, and an era ended so quietly that most people who lived through it didn't even notice it was gone until it had already been gone for years. This is the grand finale of today's journey, and I need you to feel that. We have traveled together through 3 coins today, 3 pennies, 3 1-cent pieces, 3 objects so small you could lose all of them in the cuff of a jacket, and the combined value of what we have discussed today exceeds $1 billion, which means that 3 pennies, 3 coins that were each worth 1 cent the day they were made, represent a combined collector value greater than the gross domestic product of several small nations, greater than the endowment of most American universities, greater than the lifetime earnings of thousands of ordinary Americans working honest jobs across entire careers. And the reason for that is not speculation or hype or the artificial inflation of a market manipulated by insiders. The reason is rarity, the absolute, documentable, population report verified rarity of objects that survived impossible odds to remain in a state of preservation that speaks to something almost beyond luck, something that feels, if you are willing to let yourself feel it, like intention, like these coins decided to survive, like they had somewhere to be and someone to find, and they waited, as patiently as copper can wait, for the right moment and the right hands and the right set of eyes that would finally understand what they were looking at. The 1950-60 Lincoln Wheat Penny, valued at $344 million, is the end of the wheat penny story and the beginning of every collector's obsession with it, and it ends today's video the way all great stories should end, not with a resolution that closes everything down and sends you away satisfied and finished, but with an opening. With the doors swinging wide onto a world you now see differently than you did when you walked in, a world where the change in your pocket is not just money but history, not just currency but artifact, not just coins but the physical residue of every American life that touched them across every decade they survived. And if that makes you want to look more carefully, sort more patiently, pay more attention to the ordinary objects that pass through your hands every single day, then this video has done exactly what it was made to do. And the greatest discovery you will ever make is still out there, still waiting, still patient, right at the edge of your attention, asking only one thing of you: look.